So that's just a kind of a quick orientation, and just to back up quickly, introduce myself. I'm Nicole Wilkinson. I'm at the North Carolina Water Resources Research Institute, based at North Carolina State University. I'm joining you from Raleigh, North Carolina today, and I'm also on the UCOWR Board of Directors. And just to give you a little bit of background on how we got to this webinar session, on creative conference sessions, the board has been doing some strategic planning for the last year or so, since fall 2017. And one of our strategies was that we wanted to create a more dynamic conference format, and we wanted to do more to actively engage our UCOWR community in exploring ways to do that and to support the development of these new ideas. So when you submit your abstract for the conference, you'll have the option to choose kind of a primary preferred format, along with any alternatives you are willing to pursue, kind of based on what other abstracts are submitted in the available speaking slots that we have. So you might prefer to give a standard 15-minute talk during a concurrent session, but maybe you're willing to sit on a panel or shorten that to a lightning talk, or expand it to kind of a workshop style session. So I'll talk about those three formats through this webinar, and again, that's all with the goal of making the annual conference a more dynamic and engaging event for our participants. And if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I've got, let's see, okay, sorry, just trying to work out something on my end. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about are participatory sessions. So these are sort of a workshop style session that may include several different features, but the key feature is that they are interactive in nature. So they might feature a panel or instruction or skill training, technology demonstrations, or small group activities or facilitated discussion. And this might sound really overwhelming to you in terms of planning, but this is something that we at UCOWR are willing to help you with if you have ideas that you're interested in fleshing out. So for my own state water conference that I coordinate here in North Carolina, there are abstracts submitted every year that contain really great content that can be expanded into one of these participatory sessions. So we work one-on-one with the presenters to make sure that they're supported in developing these ideas. We're helping them with a lot of the logistics and fleshing out. So in the next few slides, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of these types of sessions that we've hosted so that you can have a little bit better understanding of the range of content and features of each of these sessions, and maybe that'll spark some ideas for your own work. So this session, Creating Exceptional Places, Refining a New Innovative Ranking System, this session evolved out of a set of abstracts about the Chatham Park Watershed Protection Program. Chatham Park is a massive master plan development here in central North Carolina with the goal of exceptional design, character, and quality to preserve critical environmental resources and provide open space amenities. So the presenters share the history of the development and how a scoring system was designed to protect watershed health and improve community character. So initially, the presenters covered that in kind of a standard concurrent session. So they gave 4 20-minute talks. And then after a break came a participatory session where the participants explored the scoring system in depth and provided feedback to the consultants who were working on the project. And while this was originally developed for Chatham Park, the consultants were expanding the approach to use it across the country to evaluate projects that go above and beyond minimum design standards. So in short, they created this as an objective tool to quantify whether proposed development meets the goal of being exceptional. So they knew that the audience at our conference comprised the experts that they really wanted to tap into to get feedback on this project and make this ranking system even better. So participants explored components of categories such as conservation, stormwater management, construction site controls, and landscaping, and they prioritized various strategies based on their benefit to watershed health as well as benefit to communities. So in this session, as I mentioned, they started with presentations. The presenter also served as a facilitator for the small breakout groups. They had a graphic recorder, graphic facilitator. If you've never seen the sun, it's actually really neat to kind of be in a session where they do this. It's basically, you know, we've all been in sessions where you have long pages after pages after pages of flip chart notes that are just kind of written recordings of the conversation. The graphic recording is much more visual, so it's using images, figures, flow charts, and things like that to capture the ideas rather than verbal capture. So we're lucky to have a person locally who used to work in water resources who since launched his own company doing this kind of full time. So that was a really neat way to kind of facilitate people through the session. We did have flip charts throughout the room to capture the feedback. A lot of those had pre-written questions on them, so the groups of participants knew kind of what they were being asked to address in their small discussions. And then we have the tables preset for breakout groups, so you're not spending time during your session by rearranging tables and chairs and kind of regrouping your participants. So I mention these things because setup and logistics for a session like this are important, and we're happy to help you consider what some of those things might be needed to help your session run smoothly, to make sure your participants are actively engaged, they're not distracted by the logistics and the mechanism of the session. They can really focus on the content, and that's not something that everyone necessarily has in the back of their head. So take advantage of talking to us if you want to kind of flesh something out like that. So, you know, maybe there's a regional or national level initiative you're leading or tool you're developing. You know, maybe there's something that you're working on where you really want to get feedback from the experts who are attending the UCOWR conference, and this type of session is a great way to do that. There's really no limit to the type of content that can be covered in this type of session. The next one I want to talk about, this was expanded based off of a single abstract that was submitted to us from someone with our state's Department of Environment and Natural Resources. He basically just wanted to give a talk on a new tool he developed. But we knew that there were a number of other interactive tools and programs that had been developed in his division and that people were likely interested in. And we had a desire to have more interaction in our conference, so we approached him, and he was all too willing to expand this into more of a workshop-style session. Normally a picture like this might indicate that the presenter is terrible, right? Everybody's looking at their tablets or their computers or their smartphones. Very few people are looking up. This was actually by design, so we let people know in advance to bring their tablets, laptops, and smartphones so that they could basically explore the tools real time with our presenter and some of his fellow staff from the state. So these are tools that were designed specifically with this audience in mind to help them do their work better. And when I say this audience, this is you know, academics, private consultants, local government, state government, kind of the range of sectors and disciplines that work in the vast field of water resources. So they were designed for these people, but oftentimes we still need training on how to actually use the tools, how to access data sets, how to provide data to the state from their own research, how to engage citizen scientists, and just how to, you know, navigate all the different features that are available through these different tools and apps. This also allowed the state staff to learn kind of from their audience about potential new uses. So there were applications of these tools that they hadn't even considered before hearing from the audience, learning their needs, what features needed to be added or updated. So overall, this was a really effective and interactive session that represents kind of the technology demonstration or skills-based training that I mentioned might work for one of these sessions. And I'll say that, you know, when you talk about a dynamic conference format, we want to learn from each other. This is not meant to be a one-way street where the speaker is there just throwing information at you and you're just passively absorbing it or not. You know, this is really a great opportunity for everybody to kind of learn from each other when we set up sessions like this. The last example of a participatory session that I'll share is this one. So we did, this was from our 2018 conference, tips and tools for effective visualization, design, and communication of your research. And this is to show that not all of these sessions and conference abstracts have to be based on your original research or projects. But if you have ideas on how to improve the work that we all do, such as through better science communication or innovative funding techniques, you know, those are all really great topics to include in our conference. So, you know, think outside the box. And if you have some of that experience or know someone you could bring in to help share that experience, we would love to have that as part of our conference program. So this session was designed for students, faculty, and professionals. It was a workshop-style session. We focused on oral and poster presentations for conferences, but really it covered overall principles for narrowing the focus of your communication, no matter what that form of communication is. How to convey key points to different audiences, the role of narrative in your communication, as well as fundamental design principles for visual media, whether that's a poster or some other print form, handouts, PowerPoint presentations, anything visual that really has significant impact on how your material is received by viewers. So for example, color grouping for showing data. There's actually some really great stuff out there that you don't really think about off the top of your head, but it makes sense once you see it in practice, that if you're really trying to get people to see trends in your data, how you use color really matters. And there are some easily applied techniques that can be really effective if you use them right. So for this session, we had a couple of us up there tag teaming a presentation. We did small group exercises in between different sections of the presentation. We facilitated constructive critiques that reinforced some of those design principles. And the main way that we did this is we created a sample poster that violated a lot of the rules. So the kind of light green image that you see on your screen, we analyzed that, we worked to correct it with participants, and then we analyzed a final version that adhered to a lot of the principles that we taught through the presentations. We also hosted a very similar version of this as a pre-conference training for students giving poster presentations. So we had it really focused on posters, and we had some great feedback on that. And we co-led this with a data and visualization librarian, as well as a research assistant in marine, earth, and atmospheric sciences who happen to have a background in marketing. So it's just a really neat team that was kind of, they didn't really have expertise in water resources necessarily, but it was really great to pull their knowledge into this. So this is just kind of another one of those skills-based training sessions, but a little bit different from the tools and technology demonstration that I mentioned in the last slide. I'm going to talk briefly about panel discussions. They can sort of be lumped into participatory sessions. The trap we sometimes see with panels is that it turns more or less into concurrent sessions with a bunch of 15-minute talks by several people with only a short amount of time at the end for people to ask questions of all the presenters at once. But we want to encourage you to think about panels that are more active and engaging with both the speakers and the audience. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of features that might be included in an effective panel. One is making sure you're giving your speakers guidance up front. So what are one or two, maximum 3 key questions that you want them to cover, rather than just saying, hey, I'd like you to come talk about your research, and they're kind of all together on a theme. Makes for a great concurrent session, not so much for a panel. Put all your speakers on a level playing field. So either everybody uses PowerPoint or no one uses PowerPoint. And I would argue that for panels, often PowerPoint is not needed and serves as more of a distraction than just getting up and kind of giving prepared remarks in response to those questions you've provided. Having preset questions that a moderator is going to ask of the panelists kind of throughout the session, those are really important. Think about what you're trying to draw out of your speakers in front of your audience and what kind of information you know is in their brain. Again, you've invited them to serve on a panel for a reason. So think creatively about what you want to draw out and make sure that your moderator can help them play off of each other, help ask follow-up questions, help feed other preset questions into the conversation where they make sense. So that moderation is really important for panels. Don't make your audience wait until the end. So this is another trap that we often see, especially if we're running out of time. You want this to be engaging. You don't want your audience to have to sit there passively consume or just kind of digesting information being shared with them. You really want them to be able to ask questions real time and help contribute to an interactive discussion. As I mentioned before, we're all learning from each other, so allow your panelists to ask your audience questions and gain feedback from the audience on particular topics. And another thing that we've done really well is after kind of this broad panel discussion, interaction with the larger audience, take each panelist and plant them at a table and let audience members self-select which panelists they want to go to and talk with. This could be kind of free form. Maybe your panelists are willing to facilitate a very guided discussion based on discussion points you've set out. Maybe it's that you have an external facilitator come in and help to kind of run each small group discussion. So this can really allow participants to get additional information from panelists. Maybe you have some like a federal, state, and local government perspective on some national topic of concern. An example might be the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule or something like that that kind of is applicable nationwide. But depending on what your audience's background is, they might want to talk to someone who's working in local government and experiencing that, or someone who's at EPA. So that gives them the chance to kind of dig in a little bit more into some of those topics. So from the UCOWR perspective, what we might do is if we end up with a lot of abstracts on a similar topic, but run into limited time for oral presentation slots, we may ask authors to work together on a panel. This is a really great approach for topics where all the speakers might be giving the same background information. Climate change comes up as a good example. So we've all been to talks where essentially sessions where every presenter gives more or less the same 3, 4, 5 background slides, with the CO2 levels rising. So consider maybe one introductory talk that covers the basics, and then allow your presenters to really focus on what makes their work and their expertise unique. So there's a couple different ways that that might be approached. So that's panel discussions. The next thing I'm going to talk about is lightning talks, and this will be the kind of third dynamic conference format session that we cover in this webinar, and then we'll open it up to questions. We tried a few lightning talk sessions last year, and we definitely want to continue to offer them. And our goal here is to expose you to a lot of potentially exciting ideas in a short amount of time. So think of it as if presentations were speed dating, they would be lightning talks. So if you want to do a lightning talk or would consider it, there's a couple of options. Similar to how you can submit or encourage others to submit several talks along a similar theme, we can group those together, whether you're responding to the call for special sessions or submitting individual abstracts. The other route that we might go with, if you remember Jeopardy, they have the potpourri category, which just was kind of a random collection of different questions, right? So I think that can be a really neat dynamic session where really you're just getting exposed to a bunch of different things that maybe you only work in stormwater, and typically you would just go to stormwater-related sessions. But if you're in a lightning talk with kind of a potpourri format, and you might get exposed to a lot of really cool, neat things that you wouldn't otherwise seek out on your own. So I want to spend a little time talking about how to do a lightning talk because it shouldn't necessarily be approached as trying to cover a class lecture or a longer presentation condensed down into a 5-minute time period. And you don't necessarily need to have a TED Talk, right? It doesn't have to be this Nobel Prize winning, earth-shattering idea to make it a good lightning talk. So here I'd like to ask just a little question for thought to kind of get us into thinking about how to do this. And that is, what is the goal of a conference presentation? And this is adapted a little bit from that pre-conference workshop that I mentioned earlier on effective communication. If you're interested, you can type your response in the chat window. It might be interesting to see what people come up with. I won't pause and take a lot of time for that, but feel free to throw out some ideas if you want. So is it to prove your results to your audience by showing all of your data and methods? I would argue that's what peer review is for, to put that out there and get that kind of feedback. Is it to teach people new content that will stick with them forever? Probably not at a conference session. That's why we're scholars. We study, we attend school, we take continuing education classes, things like that. Is it to replicate in a condensed form your journal article or a thesis or a class lecture? Maybe that's what you're trying to do, but ask yourself if this is really effective. Or to summarize your work, again, is that effective? Or is it to advertise your work? that's mostly what I'm going to talk about throughout this. So since lightning talks are there to kind of enable the audience to experience all these different topics in a short amount of time, you're not there to provide them for the level of detail required to reproduce your work. You're really there to inspire them to search you out afterwards and to follow up with you to learn more details about your work. Many people get trapped by trying to summarize their work in these presentations, and I'll note that, excuse me, a lot of this content holds true whether you're giving a lightning talk or a longer presentation, but this guidance is especially true for lightning talks. So an advertisement is not necessarily the same thing as a summary. So let's explore that for a little bit. So this is a summary. Don't worry, knowing the language will not help you digest this in any effective way if you're listening to me present at a conference or even here. We've all seen this slide. Hey, we've got data, and to seem legit, we feel like we want to throw all the data up there at once. I'll let you digest that for 1 second while I take a sip of water. Excuse me. So we've seen this slide, and the presenters give the commentary of, don't worry, you don't need to know most of this. Don't pay attention to it, or this is too small to read. But I'm going to tell you about this one little piece. So you're asking your audience to do two very different things, right? You're asking them to not pay attention to it, but you've given them a visual cue that they feel compelled to pay attention to. This is a summary. It's not an effective presentation necessarily of data or results. We've all seen the really complex diagram. I think that if you are basing your entire talk around one slide and walking people through different pieces of this diagram, that can be an effective way to communicate your work, but just thrown up as an image, this is not effective. So let's kind of switch gears and think about advertisements. And if you approached an advertisement like a lot of people focus or approach a presentation or a lightning talk, you would give your audience a summary of features like this. This is not necessarily effective. So the academic presentation equivalent of these features are that you list all the results of your project, the methods, tools, data analysis, you give general background, you talk about who all your partners are, everything your lab is doing, maybe dig into minutia of your data. You talk about lessons learned throughout the process, or benefits and application of your work, which is important, or all of the above. I'll give you a hint. It should never be all of the above. That's way too much for a given presentation. So let's talk about the mental shift to an advertisement. And going back to the smart speaker example, here we've got this guy. He's locked himself out of the house in the garage again. So he asks his smart speaker to call his wife to please come open the door and let him back in the house. Your hands are full in the kitchen. You have you're trying to cook, so you ask your speaker how many tablespoons are in a stick of butter. Or you are just lazy and comfortable and you don't want to get up from the couch, so you ask your speaker to start playing your favorite TV show. So the thing that all of these ads have in common is that they mention benefits, not features. So think about the benefits and application of your work as you're thinking about the goal of your presentation and what you want to convey. So going back to this list, at any time, any of these things could be a totally valid focus or goal of your presentation. Maybe you have some new tool or methodology that's really useful for your field of study that you want to share, or you have some really cool innovative funding and partnership approaches that opened up access to resources that you otherwise wouldn't have found in kind of a conventional way. Share that. But overall, you want to determine what the benefit of your presentation or your work is to your audience. And remember that for those who, we're trying to expose people to ideas in a short amount of time. For those diehards who really want to know all these details, they're going to read your journal article, they're going to ask you for a copy of your data, they're going to talk to you afterwards. go back to the smart speaker example, they're the ones that are going to pour through every single Amazon review and all the questions and answers about the product specs, okay? So those people will find that information if they need it, but by and large, that's not where the benefit of your work is going to lie, is in those details. So that's the concept in practice for how to actually make this so, and maybe help us expand the offerings of lightning talks at the conference. If you think about what you want to present, ask, what are you trying to get your audience to discover? Are you presenting them with an unsolved question or an inspirational answer? And if so, make that the presentation title. You know, that way people have already had a little bit of time to digest it and start to get interested before your talk even begins. Because in 5 minutes of a lightning talk, you don't want to waste time actually reading your title. They already have that on the agenda. So come up with a really descriptive title, but don't put it on a slide, right? Don't waste your real estate by putting that on a slide. Don't give an outline, and please don't put it on a slide. So in longer talks, effectively setting it up, that kind of old mantra of tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That can be done effectively, but in a 5-minute talk, you probably don't have time to do that. Especially if you have this MROD outline, your introduction, methods, results, and discussion. You don't ever need to tell people that that is your outline. You can just kind of dive in. I know it sounds really painful, but skip the acknowledgments. We all know that none of us work in a vacuum, but spending time, unless partnerships are the key point of your presentation, listing all of this can actually detract from your core message, especially in 5 minutes. Strategize. You can effectively use text only or images only. Just have kind of an approach and a strategy for why you're approaching your talk the way you are. Practice. 5 minutes goes very quickly, but you don't want to be rushed through your content or people won't be able to follow you. So again, think of that TV advertisement model. It's a very short window of time with very concise, clear messages. They're not rushed, unless you're the Micro Machines man, but that doesn't count. So consider really practicing that. And there was a little anecdote. I had a friend who attended a big science communication event here in Raleigh last year, and they had a lightning talk competition, and by and large, the students blew the faculty out of the water with those. And it was because they practiced. I think students have a healthy dose of fear and a healthy level of slight discomfort maybe with the information they're presenting. For us, we get really comfortable with our content, and it makes for great lunch table conversation. It makes for great coffee conversation. It doesn't necessarily make for a great presentation because we don't always have our messages very clear and concise and rehearsed. So definitely take time to practice. Give them minimal amount of context. Remember that people are there to hear a new idea, not necessarily learn everything there is to learn about a particular topic. If you are using slides, turn them into a resource. So this is where, you know, if you feel like acknowledgments are really important, you know, provide links, citations, email addresses, websites, references, all of those things, either as footnotes or hyperlinks or just as a one-page handout you can give to your audience afterwards. You know, make that available to them, but you don't need to spend all of your time necessarily covering it. And ignore slide counts. Yes, I said that. You can give a lightning talk with 60 slides. It can be done. So I'm going to give you these quick resources. Death by PowerPoint, you guys have probably heard of that. If not, I encourage you to Google it. There are lots of great articles and resources for how to give effective presentations of any kind. But this particular link will take you to a PowerPoint presentation that has, I think, 61 slides. You can navigate through on your own and digest a lot, probably I would say the majority of the information in about 5 minutes. It's very effectively done. The Takahashi method is where you don't use any images whatsoever. You basically put 1 or 2 words per slide. That's it. And use that as your key ideas. So it really helps you to kind of move through content. So those are just some tips and tricks. Again, they apply to lots of presentations, but especially for lightning talks. And as UCOWR has seen the number of abstract submissions grow and participation in our conference grow, we want to make sure that we are able to accommodate all the great content that people have to share. And I think that lightning talks are a really great way that we can do this. But we want to do it effectively. So with that, again, let us help. Please reach out to me if you have ideas for sessions or content that you want to flesh out in something besides kind of a standard presentation. The special session proposals are due September 21st. That is right around the corner. I'm sure if you're in the midst of hashing something out, we can work a little bit with that deadline. The call for general abstracts will come out in October, and those will be due in January. And the next conference is in Snowbird, Utah. So we really hope that you will join us there. It's June 11th to 13th, and all the information can be found at UCOWR.org. So with that, I am going to stop talking. I'm going to ask Jackie to unmute herself and help to facilitate some of the questions that may have come in. I think we can unmute the attendees as well, and they can just type in on the phone. Jackie, what's the best way to approach that?
I don't think we should unmute everyone just because we would hear so much background noise, but if they raise their hand, we can unmute them and then they could talk.
Okay, great. So again, to raise your hand, if you look at that right hand, that kind of dashboard on your webinar screen, if you open up the attendees menu, then there's a little icon up at the top, a little hand where you can raise your hand, or you can type questions into the chat window. So we'll kind of monitor that for a minute. Yes, I could also ask if anyone has some thoughts about an abstract that maybe they're considering, maybe they're preparing, that they might want to share with the group, or just share an idea, and we could maybe talk about how to flesh that idea out. Okay, so we have a question. Someone asked if the slides will be available. Yes, I will definitely make sure that these slides are available. We've recorded the webinar, and we'll have the presentation posted online. I also annotate my talks, so the content will be down in the notes section as well. So I want to make this a reliable resource for folks to use afterwards. So absolutely, this will be available. Let's see, Jackie, can you help me out? I'm having a hard time expanding this window. I see that questions are coming in, but they're like squished up really tiny, and I'm not really sure how to.
Okay, we have one question from Lois that asks, is there any optimal number of presenters to have in a workshop setting?
So we have not determined the exact time frame for the workshops. Again, that depends on the number of abstracts that we have and the amount of time we have in the agenda. It's possible that workshops will be about an hour. We may be able to extend them to 2 hours with a break in between. Typically, I would say, you know, if you're doing a panel discussion, I would keep it to 4 or 5 tops. if they're doing kind of lightning talks, if you're just getting them up there and you're facilitating, yeah, I think 4 to 5 is probably best. If you're doing kind of a facilitated workshop, like a skills-based training, I think 2 to 3 presenters tag teaming works well. Anything more than that, and you get people that kind of go off the cuff a little bit, which is great, but it kind of eats into your time. But if you have a need for a longer amount of time to flesh out an idea, then definitely let us know, and we can consider how to make sure that you have the time you need. Hopefully that addressed that question.
We have one more question.
Someone asked. Go ahead, Jackie.
John says he's never been to a UCOWR meeting. What is the typical session format?
So typically we've done concurrent sessions, which is where you have 5 different rooms and there are talks going on in each of those rooms, ideally around a common theme. So maybe there's stormwater in one room, community engagement in another, watershed management in another. But over the years, we have been trying to add additional types of sessions like panels, like lightning talks. Before you kind of bounced around, you could go to individual talks or you could sit in a room and listen to all the talks on one particular theme. But that's a very passive approach. So you're kind of there in the audience, you're just hearing information, but you're not really sharing unless you're a presenter. It's not as interactive. It can be a little fatiguing by the end of the conference to just kind of be in listen mode. So we've started adding more of these types of sessions. So I think the idea is that we might have lightning talks. Maybe they're on their themes, that different themed lightning talks are happening in different rooms. Maybe the workshops are also concurrent, but you have your choice of which workshop or participatory session to go to. So it just kind of mixes things up a little bit. So I think we'll see a much different agenda this year than we have in the past. If Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of those past agendas are on the website. You should be able to get a copy of them.
Correct.
Yep. The only one question I can see is, can you describe more about how a potpourri lightning talk might look like, or how it might look? I think I really meant that the session would be potpourri. So if you think of like when you see the TEDx conferences advertised, the topics are all over the place. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about, is that the session might just be a mixture, not necessarily that one talk would be potpourri, because obviously trying to cover multiple topics in 5 minutes, that would be an interesting challenge to issue to your speakers. So hopefully that helps to clarify that.
Are there any other questions?
Any other? I haven't seen anyone raise their hand, and I can't see much in the questions box, like I said.
I think we've answered all the ones that have come in so far, Nicole.
Okay, great. Well, if you have additional questions, or again, if you have ideas that you would like to flesh out, feel free to email me or give me a call. You know, we're very invested in this organization, and we want to help you as members of the organization. So, you know, let's talk, reach out, and we hope to see you in Utah. I think we can keep the webinar open for just another minute or so, and if folks have a question, if you want to raise your hand or ask more questions, feel free to do so. I'll hang out on the line. And if not, we will send an email out to all participants letting you know when all of this information is posted to the website. And that's it. So we appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully this was useful for both UCOWR as well as maybe other conferences you're considering presenting at. And we look forward to hearing from you. Jackie, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to thank you, Nicole. This was a great webinar and lots of new ideas, and I hope people will consider these new presentation formats for the upcoming conference.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. All right, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Take care.